All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get her going here. Start me off. Where to bid to go? Have it like $1,000. Open it up.
For sale by owner real estate investing. Let's call that for sale by owner. That's what we're going to talk about today. So welcome back. Now, everyone wants to save money, thousands of dollars on real estate. And why do they want to do that? Well, they just want to save money and not have to pay real estate commissions. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about for sale by owner. Okay, I'm not sure this is the best way or the fastest way to sell property. However, I'm going to give you some insight into selling with for sale by owner, and then we'll discuss it as we get into it. I'm a little bit contrarian on this, but I believe you should know how to do it. So let's talk about it. So thousands of people are looking for a process to save themselves money on the real estate commission because they think the broker doesn't have to work very hard and they want to save that money for themselves. So later in the episode, as I say, I'll show you some contrarian ideas. Now, for sale by owner means the seller will assume all the responsibility for the sale. All right, now think about what I said. The seller is going to take over the whole process and do everything. For example, the seller will determine the selling price. The seller will research the comparables. The seller will know and understand the neighborhood. The seller will be prepared to put the documentation onto the multiple listing service or anywhere else that you're going to list the property. The seller is going to show the property to the prospects. In other words, when people come to buy it, they're going to show the property. The seller is going to maybe even stage the property, make it look real pretty, and make it look as best they can under the circumstances. In other words, the seller is going to do just about everything. Now, the sticky part for many of the sellers is they don't know exactly how to do the paperwork and prepare it when working with the title company. So you need to stop at a title company and find out how to do that before you get started. So in this instance, the seller is taking responsibility for the whole process. That's called for sale by owner. Now, I'm Ted Thomas. I've been involved in real estate for a long time, but I've been involved in tax defaulted real estate for the past 30 years. Now, with tax defaulted property, we actually do sell the properties ourselves, and we also use brokers, but we use everything that's available to us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this. So tax defaulted real estate is usually a little bit on the used and abused side. Now, some of it's absolutely junk. Don't buy that. But there's others that just need to be cleaned up and fixed up, and they're ready to go. All right, so I'm in a non-traditional part of the real estate business. So traditional real estate would be homes or houses. It would be small apartments, small office buildings, buildable residential lots, and that kind of thing. Okay, well, I'm in a part of the business where the people have defaulted. In other words, the property owner has not paid the property tax, and the county has taken action. And the action they take is they confiscate the property and they sell it for pennies on the dollar. All right, now these defaulted properties are out there and they're for sale, and the starting price usually is somewhere very close to the back taxes, 10 or 20 cents on the dollar. And when the county auctions the property, the county, the official treasurer and tax collector, will actually wipe out the mortgage and they'll wipe out the deed of trust. So we're buying properties at the right price. And so what do we want to do with those? We want to try to buy them low and sell them low. So when you go to do that, we'd like to do that ourselves, just as the for sale by owner would like to do. However, there's a little bit of work getting involved in this. So let's concentrate on this for sale by owner. And that's what a lot of people want to do. There's a lot of pros and cons to that. Usually the selling of properties, the seller has some difficulty handling the contract. So that means that you need to go to a title company and figure out how to handle that first of all, and then you might want to talk to an attorney about that same thing if your state requires that. But where the big breakdown usually comes for sale by owner is they don't understand the media, and it's important to understand media. Why? Because if you're going to sell, you're going to actually need media. Now, I don't mean just printing up one little white sign and sticking it in the front lawn. You're going to have to do something about really letting the world know that that property is for sale. So many sellers fail to think that over and they don't get it done. Many sellers also forget that when people buy property, they negotiate back and forth. And so that means you have to memorialize each one of those negotiations so that it's done correctly. Nothing can be done in real estate unless it's done in writing. You can't buy or sell unless it's done in writing. So if you're going to be a for sale by owner, you need to be prepared to do that. It's not just showing someone around the property. It's making sure that you do all the paperwork right. All right, now what makes the big difference in sales? Number one is location, and number two is pricing. All right, now this makes a big difference. Now, I'm fond of saying this. I'm fond of saying you can change the property. That means you could paint it, you can renovate it and do everything, but you can't change the neighborhood. So that location in that neighborhood is going to be extremely important. So you need to understand, if you're going to be a for sale by owner, what are the comparable values in that neighborhood? You're going to have to become a mini expert on that, because people are going to know that come to buy because they're coming to that neighborhood. They want the neighborhood, maybe for schools or whatever, but you're getting the idea. So for sale by owner sounds very easy, like the broker just walks in, shows it once, and it's all done. It's going to be a lot more complex than that. So as I say, you can't fix the neighborhood, but you can fix the property. So you should understand that you need to know a lot about that neighborhood. So if you're going to be a seller, you need to understand what the pricing is and not price it out of the market. Now, there's a lot of sellers that don't have any idea of how to price the property, and they have very lofty ideas of what their property's worth. But you might get educated by finding out ahead of time. All right, so generally, the seller is going to inflate the price. In other words, you're going to try to get a high price. Well, when you can't sell it, you'll find out that your price is too high. Now, how much are you going to bring it down? Well, that doesn't take just guessing. It really requires some estimating and knowing what comparable prices are, why that neighborhood's in demand, and why your pricing's in demand. So for sale by owner is not the simplest process in the whole world. So a seller without a realtor is kind of a risky thing to take, unless you're going to really spend time trying to figure out what goes on. Now, we spend a lot of time when we're teaching people how to buy tax defaulted property. It's a piece of cake to buy because we're buying at 10, 20, 30 cents on the dollar. We don't have mortgages on the property. We don't have deed of trust. Now, what about selling? Selling is going to be the big challenge, okay? So selling a property is not as easy as everybody thinks it is, especially if you don't know about the comparison. All right, now selling can also be an adversarial process. Offers, counteroffers, offers, counteroffers, a lot of emotions involved there. All right, so if you're not ready for that, then you better make sure that you've got a broker working for you to make sure that they're going to be able to handle all that. All right, now most people don't think there's much competition in real estate. There's a ton of competition when it comes to real estate, but sellers don't see that. They don't see that because they don't understand that all this media is out there competing with them for the sale of property. All right, so the solution to selling is media. Now, what do I mean when I say media? You need to be able to put this property on Craigslist. You need to know how to use eBay. You want to use Zillow, you want to use Trulia, you want to use the multiple listing system, you want to use every electronic site that you can find. You definitely want to have signs on the lawn. You want to have signs throughout the neighborhood. What's wrong with working with real estate clubs? I'm just naming a few of these. Some people put up billboards, some people use mailers. You need to do all of that if you're going to be a for sale by owner. Now, if you check with the National Association of Realtors, they're going to tell you that less than 10% of the properties are sold by the owner. And that's why, because you have to understand the neighborhood, you have to understand the location, you have to understand the pricing, but most of all, you really need to understand what the media is all about. Okay, so I'm about to button this up. I've been involved in the tax defaulted business for well over 30 years as an investor, as a teacher, and as a guide. The biggest problem I've found out that newcomers have is not purchasing at auction. That's the easy part. We buy for 10, 20 cents on the dollar with no mortgage and no deed of trust. The biggest problem is getting the property sold. So if you want to be a seller, you want to be for sale by owner, nothing wrong with that. But keep in mind, you're going to have to think about, if you want to get to the bank with profits, we're buying at 10 and 20 cents on the dollar, but we know it takes massive media to sell the property. So you're going to have to think about that. Remember, the county is selling tax defaulted property in all 3,000 counties across the nation. All right, we're selling below the market prices, and we have to use active media. Now, how can we sell below market value? Because the tax assessed value will be one value, but we're buying it from the treasurer for 10 or 20 or 30 cents. So we've got quite a bit of margin in our property, but we still have to let the world know about it. So in my 30 years of guiding people, I found out the biggest problem that we have is getting people in the business of selling and marketing the property. All right, so the biggest blunder that you can make is not understanding that you need marketing. Now, what do I mean when I say marketing? I mean that you need to be thinking about using Zillow. You need to be using Trulia, using MLS, using Craigslist, using eBay. You have to get out there and let the world know that property is for sale. All right, so the selling process is what's going to allow you to succeed in the marketplace. Now, I'm finished with my time, but before I go, I do want to mention, you see those little white circles? That's how many auctions are taking place within that state in the next 90 days. This calendar updates every single day. I'm here today to show you how to make money. To do that, I'm going to show you briefly that there are thousands of tax defaulted real estate properties across the 3,000 plus counties in the United States. This is quite interesting. You're looking at the Ted Thomas Magic Interactive Map and Auction Calendar. It changes every day. Now, I created the calendar and the map so I would know how many auctions are taking place every day in the United States. Now I can show the little guy how to make money. Most importantly, I created this system so I could have an auction list for each auction 24/7. Well, there you have it, folks. In the small population counties, there's going to be dozens of properties for auction. All right, in the large population county, there's not going to be dozens, there's going to be hundreds. I've even been to auctions with more than 2,000 properties that are up for auction. So you can see this is a big business you can take advantage of. Now, if you'd like to see what an auction list really looks like, you can just register below and request an auction list. I'm Ted Thomas. Don't forget, request your free auction list right below me.